Okay, hi guys. Thank you for coming to our Teachers of Nature program today. This program is funded in part by the U.S. Institute of Museum and Library Services under the provision of the Library Services and Technology Act, administered in California by the state librarian, which means that the California State Library has given us funding, so the program is free to use. So thank you very much to them and the LSTA program. And my name is Miss Margaret. I am with the County of San Luis Obispo Public Libraries, but I will not take up all your time because I know what you really want to see are amazing animals. So I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and turn you over to Cindy with Teachers of Nature, who is going to be introducing you to all kinds of critters with amazing tails today.
I am. Thank you so much. So I hope that I see a few familiar names. So I think some of you were at my other program. And today we're going to be talking about the truths and tales about animal tales. So learning a little bit about animal tales because, of course, it's kind of silly, but we don't have a tail. We naturally should because we have a tailbone. A tailbone is what a tail is attached to. And actually, if an animal does not have a tailbone, it cannot have a tail. So we're going to discuss that a little bit because sometimes people will make mistakes about an animal thinking that it has a tail when it actually does not. So let's talk about animal tails, what they use them for, and well, really how awesome they are. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have so much stuff open. So we're going to start off talking about dogs because that's something we're very familiar with and we all recognize that a dog wags its tail when it is happy. It will put its tail down between its legs if it's scared. Sometimes its tail will be straight out if it is curious or maybe trying to pounce on something. Dogs really show their emotions with their tails. So we are very familiar with what a dog uses its tail for. Some dog tails are long, some dog tails are short. I have a bulldog, an English bulldog. His tail is about this long, super duper tiny. It's ridiculous when he tries to wag it. He realizes he doesn't have a tail to wag, so instead he wags like his whole entire behind. And his whole back end is like, I just want you to know I am wagging my tail even though I don't have one really. So yes, English bulldogs are adorable and he's adorable. He's just silly when he tries to wag his little tiny tail. Lots of animals that you might be familiar with use their tails as fly swatters. Super duper convenient. If you're living outdoors, you are going to be exposed to a lot of insects and bugs, and having your own built-in fly swatter is probably pretty convenient for you. Horses, of course, they have nice long hairs. It's nice and full. They're the horses and cows are like just constantly just moving their tails back and forth. Not necessarily that there is a fly on them, but just preventing the flies altogether. Uh, Giraffes have the longest tail of any animal in the world. Their tails can be with their hair up to 8 feet long. That is very long. And elephants have the strongest land animal tail. They have a tail so strong that they can smush a horsefly with it. That's really the only fly that will penetrate their skin. So that's why they have such a strong tail, because the little tiny flies, they don't even care about them. They only care about those horse flies. And I've been hit on accident with an elephant tail. It had knocked me over like a baseball bat. Super duper strong. So I was in the wrong place at the wrong time and boom, got smacked just flat down on the ground. They are very strong. Lizards probably have the most amazing tail because they do several things with their tails. A lot of lizards will use their tail to protect themselves. This is a Euromastix or a spiny-tailed lizard. They have spikes on their tails that they can smack a predator with. These lizards also, when they run, drag their tail on the ground and create a dust storm behind them. So a predator chasing them will get a whole bunch of dust in their face and stop to get it out. And they also store fat in their tail. They use that for times of famine when they can't find food. And then last but not least, some lizards can braid off their tail and grow it back. Uromastics do not. Our little blue-throated lizards do that. They will break off their tails. You perhaps have seen that happen before. And geckos very commonly break off their tails as well. This is Big Boy or BB. And Big Boy is a leopard gecko. Check out that tail. Nice and fat and super chunky, right? Yeah, well, when it comes to leopard gecko tails, you want chunky because they're storing fat in that tail. They're keeping it saved up for those times when they can't find food. And Big Boy here probably has about 2 months worth of nutrition in that tail right there. He has a lot stored up, and that's going to get him through times when he can't find any food. He's just going to use those reserves, kind of like a camel would use the reserves in its hump. They store fat in their hump as well. So something that is really interesting right now, you can kind of see on the top of his head right here, got a little bit of shed still stuck to him. He just shed last night, and I guess that's a little spot he missed. He couldn't get up there. But leopard geckos, instead of leaving their shed behind like snakes or other lizards, they eat their shed. They gobble it up like it is a delicious breakfast cereal. And that's because they took a lot of energy to make it. And it's got protein. It's just simply protein. The scales are made of protein. And why waste it? So they've spent a lot of energy shedding. They might as well get a little bit back into their systems. And besides, nobody wants to leave around evidence for a predator that you were there, right? So they are eating it and getting rid of that evidence so they can go out and not worry about something knowing that they are around. So lizards' tails, super incredible, but they cannot regrow their tail over and over and over again. They can simply regrow their tail one time. So it is not something that they want to happen. But if there is an emergency and there is no other way to get away, then that's what they'll do. And it doesn't even have to be pulled on. They can do it by themselves. Just, it's called autonomy. They just like pop it off. So I am just not sure how that whole scientific thing works, but they can just pop it off themselves. So we have a question: what do lizards eat? Different lizards eat different things. Geckos are insectivores, so they eat lots of insects and bugs. The picture of the uromastic or the spiny-tailed lizard, those lizards are herbivores, so they only eat plants. So it really just depends on the kind of lizard that you are looking at. And bearded dragons, they eat both. They eat insects and bugs and the plants. So I give them crickets, and then I also give them some yummy salads to eat.
I think she was asking too, what eats lizards?
Oh, what eats lizards? I read it backwards. I glanced down at it. I just thought eat lizards. So it just depends. There are lots of small mammals that will eat them if they can catch them. Lots of birds of prey will hunt for lizards that are scurrying around. So it really just depends where they are and what type of predators are around. But it's usually those smaller mammals, like I don't think a cougar is going to take the time to hunt a little tiny lizard. It's just not going to be filling enough. All right. So what other kind of tails can we talk about? How about for swimming? Can't forget about swimming. We have dolphins, whales, fish. There are so many different types of marine mammals and fish that use their tails for swimming. The blue whale has the strongest tail in the water. So remember, the elephant has strongest tail on land. Blue whale has strongest tail on the water. And let's talk about tails that can be used as a defense, because a defense is important sometimes, and there are quite a few animals that use their tails as a defense. So let's talk first about the porcupine, and then we'll talk about the scorpion here. First, the porcupine. If you look at this porcupine's the picture, can you see this pink part right here? That's the base of his tail. And those big, thick quills are attached to the base of his tail. Those are the business quills. These quills up here are just to keep him warm, kind of to look, a little scary around the body also. But if he's serious about sticking to something, it is going to be those tail quills that he is using. So these are a couple of tail quills that I have. They came from an African crested porcupine that I worked with. His name was Quillo, by the way. And these quills are super thick. They're really hard and they're very sharp, super pointy. You do not want to be stuck with them. Now the question is, can they shoot their quills? Well, their quills are attached into their skin. You can kind of see on the ends of these, you can see a darker end. That's where they were attached into the skin. So just like our hair, if we were to pull a hair out, we would see on the very end a little tip that's a little darker. And that is because our hair is attached into our skin and porcupine quills are attached into their skin. In fact, they're made out of the same stuff as our hair, made out of a protein called keratin. So let me ask all of you, can any of you shoot hairs out of your head? Can we shoot hairs out of our arms? No. Answer is no. That's right, Grace. We cannot, and neither can porcupines. They simply run back and forth, and they're rattling their quills to scare off the predator. And in doing that, sometimes they come loose from the skin and they fall out. But they're doing so much running around and running back and forth that it looks like they are being shot out. But they are not. They cannot go like, and just all those little quills go shooting across the way. No, that's not going to happen. So let's talk about the scorpion. At the beginning, I said you have to have a tailbone to have a tail, correct? Well, scorpions are invertebrates, which means that they don't have any bones. They don't have any bones, they can't have a tailbone. So what you see is just their exoskeleton that has gone into a shape that we recognize as a tail, but it is not a tail at all. And a lot of times we mistake those things for a tail. Think of a bee. Sometimes people are saying, oh yeah, they're bees. That's right. Their stinger is attached to their tail. No, they don't have a tail. This is Vanessa. I think you guys might have visited Vanessa last week or met her. And you remember her super long body. Well, she also doesn't have a tail. And a lot of times we'll mistake anything that grows behind the back legs as a tail because that's naturally where it's going to grow out of. Like you look at a cat, back legs end, tail grows out. Look at a dog, same thing. A horse, everything. Back legs end, whatever is beyond the back legs or behind those back legs is automatically what we consider a tail. But being an invertebrate or an animal that doesn't have any bones, it is impossible for her to grow a tail. So she does not have a tail. So for those of you who weren't here last week, Vanessa is a walking stick or a stick bug, sometimes called a stick insect. And this one, she is from Vietnam. She is a Vietnamese walking stick, but we have stick insects here in Texas, and you guys have them in California also. Yeah, they're just a lot smaller. She's kind of, she is giant size. She's extra large. She is the extra large size. But anytime that you see any kind of an insect, any kind of invertebrate, just remember no tail. Even though it might give the impression of a tail, they do not have a tail. All right, so using it for protection, definitely something that happens and is needed. Sometimes animals use their tails to sleep on. I used to have a fox, a little Fennec Fox that I took care of, and he would always use his tail as a pillow. And then when it was cold, he would put it over his nose like a blanket. It's adorable. And then if you don't have any other toys, hey, a tail makes a good toy too, doesn't it? I've seen dogs chase their tail like bee, 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 and it's like, you're probably never going to catch it. And if you do, you won't be very happy that you did. But sometimes if you lack toys, you know, you have to make do with what you have. And a tail makes a pretty good one. Probably mama is not too happy about that, but the baby looks funny. Like he's having a fun time. All right. Let's talk about monkeys because this is where a lot of times we make big mistakes. First of all, not all monkeys have a prehensile tail, meaning a tail that has muscles that they can grab on with. I'm not sure if you guys remember the sugar glider from last week, but she has a semi-prehensile tail, which means that she's got muscles in it, but she can't actually hang from her tail. The only monkeys that can hang from their tail for any period of time more than 10 seconds is a spider monkey. This is a picture of a spider monkey. And if you look at how long her tail is, you can also see on the bottom, there is a special, like the palm of our hand, a special little pad that helps her to be able to do that. They are the only ones that have that special pad on the bottom of their tail. They can hang from their tail. They can just hanging from their tail, eating their food, doing whatever they feel like. They have an extremely strong tail. It is just as strong as a hand. And I wanted to show you this cool close-up of that little print because spider monkeys have their very own tail print, just like every human has their very own fingerprint. So every tail print is unique to that particular spider monkey, just like every fingerprint is unique to us, right? Every human. Tails can be used as balance because it is very important, especially if you are a kangaroo and you need to run somewhere or hop really fast. Your body weight is leaning forward, which means that you need something to balance out the back. So the tail is what they use for balance. Imagine if we had to run and we decided to put our heads down and just run straight forward. We probably wouldn't get but a couple of steps before we fell flat on our face. So having a tail for balance would be super helpful for us if that's the way we decided to run. And kangaroos can even use their tails as a third leg. So they can pick up their two legs and use them to defend themselves. All right, so let's talk about balance, using your tail for balance, and meet a little friend that absolutely does that. This is Skittles, and Skittles is a chinchilla. And chinchillas, they have this big, soft, fluffy fur that surrounds her whole entire body. And she's super duper thick fur. Oh my gosh, she's so soft. Do you think her tail looks just like her fuzz? Her fuzzy body? Okay, check it out. What? What is up with that tail? That does not look like it's supposed to be attached to this right here. Well, she uses her tail for two things. Number one, for balancing, because where she lives, up in these high elevation Andes mountains, there are cliffs that she has to navigate and jump from one to the other. And a lot of times she will have to jump and then kind of balance on a ledge. So she uses her tail to help her to balance. And she also uses her tail for sweeping dust. Not that she's like a super housekeeper, but because she bathes in dust. That is how chinchillas bathe themselves and keep snowflakes from sticking to them and melting into their fur and getting them wet. So they roll around in the lava dust that they find in the mountains where they live. Their mountains are made out of lava, and a lot of times it will just crumble. It's constantly eroding, and she uses that tail to sweep the dust into a pile and make a nice little bath for herself. She's like, water? No. Dust? Yes. So chinchillas are herbivores. They eat plants only. Where she lives, there is not a lot of plants to eat. So Her choices are roots, twigs, branches, bark of trees, bulbs growing on things. That is about it. She doesn't have a whole lot of choices for food. She is never going to find green grass. What she does find that's green is moss and algae that is growing on the rocks. So where the sun hits in certain places, there will be algae and moss growing on the rocks, and she will chew the moss off of the rocks, which is really good for her because it also trims her teeth at the same time. Chinchillas are rodents, and rodents have teeth that grow consistently, meaning that their teeth never stop growing. And if she didn't trim her teeth, she would have been looking at you like, her teeth would have just been sticking straight out. And then, of course, she wouldn't be able to eat right. So she is constantly chewing on things, same as mice and rats and things like that, because they have to. If they don't, their teeth will overgrow. So that's why they're constantly chewing on things. Okay, and remember, if you have any questions, go ahead and use the chat. You're welcome to put any questions in there. I'll be happy to answer them, all right? All right, so signaling for danger is sometimes important, especially if you need to do it silently. If you don't want to alert a predator that the whole entire herd knows that the predator is there, you can do it silently, especially if you're a white-tailed deer, because normally that white-tailed deer right there is going to have this tail down and it's going to be brown. When that tail flips up, danger. That deer has spotted something that is wrong, and they are signaling the whole entire herd that they know that there is danger. Now, that deer is not going to take off until he sees the whole entire herd with their tails up, meaning everybody is ready. And then it's going to dart off. The whole entire herd will dart at the same time. That predator is not going to have a chance to pinpoint one of those deer that might be too slow and wasn't aware of what's going on. So having a silent signal is great to have when you live in a big group like that. And then this picture right here is a quadrumundi. And quadrumundis, they have this amazingly long tail that you can see they can hold straight up. And just like each individual lemur and each individual spider monkey, they each have their own individual patterns. And in the tall grasses, if they hold up their tail, they can identify each other by their tails. They don't have to look at their faces. So can you imagine identifying everybody else, your friends by their tail? You're like, turn around, let me check your tail to see who you are. Yeah. And then, of course, tadpoles. Tadpoles, they start off with a tail, and then their tails disappear. They turn into frogs or toads. So what in the world happens to their tail? Does it fall off? No. Their tail is absorbed into their body. So while they are growing their legs, they will absorb their tail into their body and use the nutrients from that tail to help them to be able to grow their legs and develop their lungs so they can leave the water. So this is Teddy the toad. And Teddy the toad, he is pretty cool. He's got this really amazing pattern, that cool stripe down his back, great for camouflage, and those big bulgy eyes that are pretty much, consistent with all frogs and toads. We really recognize them for their big bulgy eyes, don't we? And just like the sugar glider last week, those bulgy eyes help him to be able to see all the way around him. So he's going to be able to see things coming up from anywhere around him. And I'm not sure, did you guys meet Katrina last week? The tree frog? Did I have Katrina with me? No. So they have those amazing big bulgy eyes that can only focus on things that are moving. They cannot see something if it's not moving. So something actually has to be moving for their eyeballs to be able to focus on it. So you could stand right in front of a frog or a toad, and if you're really still, they won't even know you're there watching. Oh, kind of creepy, right?
Did you see there's a question? What kind of toad is it?
Yes. So Teddy is a Texas toad, and Texas toads, obviously, they come from where I live in Texas. I found Teddy about 3 years ago. He was in my front yard. He was hopping in circles, and that's because he had a badly injured leg. And with just one leg, you really can't hop. You can't push off evenly. So I took him in and I started to, I helped him to get better, hoping that it would heal enough and be strong enough that he would be able to be released. But unfortunately, he was not. So when I released him, he still kind of went really slow and he went a little sideways. I was like, he's probably not going to survive out there. So Teddy stayed with me. And then let's see, do frogs have tailbones? So they do. And surprisingly enough, some frogs keep their tails. So I have seen some that that will keep their tails. And of course, we have salamanders and newts that are also amphibians and start off as tadpoles, and they keep their tails for their whole lives. So they do have a tailbone. They just usually absorb it. But I had a little girl in one of my classes, and she had a tadpole that never absorbed the entire tail. So she had then a frog that had like a short little tail. It was pretty cute. It was adorable. Teddy got dirt all over here. He just got everything dirty. Okay. So tails can be used for steering, really important, especially if you're going places fast, like a cheetah. And sugar gliders and flying squirrels use theirs for turning, going from one place to the other, making sure that the wind doesn't take them somewhere where they don't want to go. Beavers, beavers, they have the most unique tail, I think. Nice flat tail they use for building, and they can also signal for danger by slapping their tails on the water. They will often alert each other of danger. Stopping. If you've ever watched a bird coming in for a landing, they spread out their tail and then they usually push it down. And that is what they are using for wind resistance, so they can stop. But of course, they also use it for steering as well, and balance. If you've ever watched a bird on a wire and there's wind, you'll see the tail going boop, 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 boop. It'll like start moving up and down. They're using it for balance to make sure they don't get blown off of that wire. They need to balance pretty well to be able to stay up there. And birds also use their tails for display to look lovely. So check it out. I have some of these tail feathers. The first one was a golden pheasant, that picture. That didn't show the entire tail feather. Look at how long their tail feathers are. They are super long. That is really long. They definitely don't use these for flying. These are 100% display. And then we probably all recognize the peacock feather, right? These are a tail feather that we call a train. Only the male peacocks have the train. The female peacocks, they don't have all these bright colors. The males use it for display to go, look at me, I am so attractive. So it is 100% display. Definitely not helping a peacock to fly, because if you've ever seen a peacock fly before, it is totally ridiculous. They are the most uncoordinated birds. They're like chickens. So they are not good at flying. So let's answer a question that everybody always asks me. Do snakes have tails? What do you think? Put it in the chat. Do snakes have tails? Okay, we have a no. I only see one no. I don't think so. It's hard. That's funny. Okay. Well, let's figure out the mystery. Do snakes have tails? They actually do have tails. So I'm going to hold him up. I am going to show you underneath. Can you see those two little dots right there? Those are spurs. That is where on the other side, each side of his cloaca. And his cloaca is where he goes to the bathroom. And then everything beneath his cloaca is his tail. Is that a very long tail? Not really. It's a ridiculously short tail. Compared to lizards, lizards usually their tails are about half the length of, or the same length as their body. So they have really, really long tails, but snakes have extremely short tails. The males have much shorter tails than the females do. So this is Deuce. Deuce is a ball python. He's an albino ball python. That's why he has these gorgeous yellow colors. But in the wild, he probably would not be able to survive very well because he kind of looks like a big banana. But in human care, it doesn't really matter what color he is. He's just gorgeous. So that's what matters, is that he's super duper pretty. Yes, you're super duper pretty. So in other words, yes, snakes do have tails. They are just pretty small. And for those of you who are scared of snakes, that have a fear of snakes, you know what? Snakes are really, really super helpful animals. They do help to keep the rodent population under control. It makes sure that, you know, we don't have things that are eating our crops and damaging our damaging any of our food that we're trying to eat. So snakes are super duper important. Is the rattle on a rattlesnake a tail? That is an extension of their tail. Yeah. So that actually is part of their tail, unlike the scorpion. Last but not least, I saved the best for last. You want to see the grossest thing that an animal does with their tail? It's the grossest. I mean, gross, gross. That would be the hippo. And hippos use their tails to scatter poop. That's right. They poop and they take their tail and they swish it back and forth and they splatter poop all over the place. The further the poop goes, the bigger their territory, meaning that the stronger the tail, the further the poop is going to go and the bigger their territory. That is something that is incredible that they do. Here in Dallas, we have a giant hippo enclosure at the Dallas Zoo, and they will splatter their poop everywhere while they're going to the bathroom. It gets the biggest screams and, oh no, yeah, it's great. Like everyone's like, no way, did you see that? Oh my gosh, there was poop going everywhere. Yeah. In the wild, it is a super important thing to make sure that they can mark their territories from other hippo families, and nothing is going to come into their habitat, to their home that they have made each other, to their territory. So yeah, pretty gross, but everything's kind of gross in their own way. We got an ew. All right, so let's go ahead and open it up to questions. Do we have any questions from anybody? And then Ms. Margaret, if you want to maybe stop the recording so we can get some questions.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and stop that now.